This is part 2 of episode 10, which includes our Lectio Divina practice and our character blessings. If you would like to hear our discussion about the theme of death in general in this episode of Our Flag Means Death, you can find all of that in part 1. And now, on to part 2.
Hi, my name is Alexis.
And I'm Anna.
And I'm Evelyn.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Katie.
This week, Our Flag Means Death. Season 1, Episode 10, Wherever You Go, There You Are.
Shall we move on to Lectio Divina? Okay. Who do you want to have pick a number between 1 and 333?
73.
Thank you. See what we get. 73. Hanging on by a thread is the line. Well done. I wanted to look at these lyrics more anyway. So let's talk about what's literally happening here.
Okay. Literally, Ed is sitting in the pillow fort. He's asked Lucius to come in to record this song lyric that he has. He sings the lyric. And that's what it is. He's saying literally hanging on by a thread is his lyric. And when he's questioned about it, Lucius is like, oh, is that how you're feeling? He's like, no, this song isn't about me. It's about somebody else. So that's, I think, important in the denial aspect of it.
Excellent. All right. Where do we see this allegorically? A thread somewhere else. Well, I didn't mean to say thread again, but like something similar in another show, book, movie, scripture, wherever. Hanging on by a thread.
It makes me think of the labyrinth. What is the story with the Minotaur? Minotaur?
Yeah.
But who's in the labyrinth? I can't remember the guy's name. That's what, whenever I hear hanging by a thread, I think about that he took the thread, the string in with him into the labyrinth. And then he had to use the thread to find his way back out. And so it's this really teeny tiny little thin thread, and he's holding on by a thread. Whatever his name is.
Yeah, no, that's good.
It's
not Odysseus, no.
It's not Odysseus.
I thought Odysseus too, and I'm like, it's not Odysseus though.
Not Perseus.
No, but it's like the Minotaur in the center of the labyrinth, and he has to go in and kill the labyrinth, and then some chick gives him the ball of thread. We can call him Odysseus, even though that's his name. Anyway, that was my thought. Hanging on by a thread.
Oh my gosh, mine's not very good, but I just picture that cat poster that's like, hang in there, like you're hanging on.
When we say, like, when somebody tells you they're hanging on by a thread, or I've said like held together with paper clips or something like that, it means like very weak, right? But then this time I also thought of the words, like when we say something is threadbare, it's very like poor. Like if people are threadbare people, like all of their stuff is very worn out and poor, lowly status. So
Theseus?
That's an interesting.
Sorry, is that his name?
What's his name?
What is his name?
Theseus?
Theseus. Is it Theseus?
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Does it? I don't know mythology.
Theseus
No,
in
yeah,
the
I just
labyrinth
read
sounds
it.
right. Yeah?
I just read it about it. Fell in love with Theseus, a Greek hero who came to Crete to slay the Minotaur.
Yeah,
He
all
was
right.
given I don't know how
Ariadne.
Ariadne. Thread.
Ariadne in the labyrinth, Theseus, Minotaur. Yes. Thank you, Wikipedia and Evelyn.
Thank you, Wikipedia. Sorry, Katie.
No, you're great. That's it.
I have it's been a few episodes since I made reference to Taylor Swift. So there's a song called Invisible String, and it's about, like, she says, like, there's this invisible string that ties me to you. And so while that's not exactly what's happening here, we could also like think of like there's still this connection. I love that. Like we think about the relationship between Steed and Ed, that is also hanging on by a thread, maybe. Like that's interesting, right? Because he has these things and he's in Steed's space. And so it could be something that connects them as well. And it's tenuous, but it's still there.
I love that.
I don't want to go too far out of it right now, but I think what you're saying, Victoria, is so important because this idea of never left, we really picked apart a lot. And there's so much that we try to give Ed credit for, I think, in that he's like, never left. But we really see in this episode that Steed is like, I never left you. Like
Yeah.
I was still with you in his heart and his spirit. So hanging on by a thread, let go, can't let go.
Not supposed to. And that's what's going to get them through right now, which is that one little thread, which also like the labyrinth, right? Oh, I love this. Actually, we're going to come full circle because then like to the labyrinth helping you like find your way out, it's there. That connection is there. And so that's interesting. That's interesting.
Oh, I love that so much that they're going to find their way back and that they're using because it's like, yeah, it's definitely tenuous. I love that word. That's definitely where we're at now. But yeah, that they have that connection, that they have that care still for each other, even though, Ed might deny it. But yeah, that they're still pulled towards each other. But it's very fragile right now. It's delicate right now. But again, it's not something that they've never left each other. But yeah, it doesn't mean hard times aren't coming.
No, which is totally like I like the idea of that with the Minotaur. Like the Minotaur has to be killed, and then you're gonna like use the thread to find your way back out of the labyrinth. Yeah, and I like that too because like I don't like whatever you think about soulmates, right? Like I like the idea, like I like the thing like finding your person, right? Which is not a soulmate, but just finding this person that you're very connected to. And it takes two to make this happen, right? And so I like that too, right? Like I like the idea of a thread connecting people because there's choice there. Like I think you both have to hold on to the thread. And so, whether it's like what the one out waiting, the one that's still there that you left at the outside of the labyrinth, and then you had to hold on to it like throughout and then find your way back. I love that like, because if that person doesn't hold on to it, it's not anchored to anything, right? It's not connected. And so I like that idea of like, just like anything, right? I guess if there's that thread that connecting you, as you navigate your way through all of this, you're going to find your way back as long as you're each holding on to your end. And there's a lot you can get through if you're just each holding on to your end.
And that's sweet because he ends with that hold on, hold on, hold on. That's cute.
Yeah.
Sorry,
oh, yeah. Oh. And then what were you going to say, Anna?
Oh, I was going to say that holding on part, like you were saying, Alexis and Victoria, holding it gently because you can't muscle your way with a thread.
No.
Like it's not going to work. And so it's holding it, but it's very gentle, keeping it. But both people have to do that in order to keep the tension to make sure you can actually like find each other. Anyway, this is lovely. This is amazing. Good job, Evelyn, in selecting this line.
I also, when Victoria started speaking, I was thinking, okay, Victoria, now tie it back to Romeo and Juliet.
Oh.
But as I was thinking that in my head, I really thought, oh my gosh, if we're talking about threads, that's the Pinocchio story. And like when his threads are cut, he becomes a real boy, right? When he can learn, I mean, it's a weird story because he kind of becomes independent, even though he's still a boy. But that's what leads him back to Geppetto. And that's what allows him to be a real boy is that the threads, like metaphorically, threads are cut. And then that like cutting the apron strings, which is not the same as a thread, but anyway.
No, totally. Actually, my thought about Romeo and Juliet was earlier because I was just thinking about deaths that aren't the main deaths, but that are part of the story. And I just think Mercutio's death is super important to the story. And I couldn't quite connect it. I just started thinking about his death and how, and then I'm like, that doesn't apply here. But now we just need a Peter Pan and we'll have closed the loop on all of our like threads of references.
All right. The next phase is in your life, hanging on by a thread. Victoria, you're shaking your head big. What are you thinking?
All the time. All the time. Bangs. I have bangs for a reason. Hanging on. This is hanging on by a thread. I know our listeners can't see. Like, what? You know what's going to help right now? And then Katie's illustration of the grooves like are just so beautiful and just a great way for me to think about that experience. And then also like the idea of a thread, like that's kind of it too. Like each time like you fall down the groove, make sure you have your threads in place so you can very carefully find your way back out of the groove. But yeah, I mean, there's good stuff too, but life's complicated.
I guess I'm thinking of when I'm in that state of like holding on, things aren't like you're in it for the long haul, or things are really stressful. I'm thinking of school, like I have a project right now. And like if I let go, it's all gonna like collapse and be for nothing. And part of me is like, let me get ready for this fall. Let me shorten this length so that I can go down a little bit more. I don't have to do a big project. I can do something and like brace myself for these little changes to accommodate what I actually can accomplish.
I So I initially was thinking about hanging on by a thread in my own life in the same way. Um, because I think sometimes, especially if people don't know me very well, they'll be like, oh, she's just loosey goosey and whatever. And then when they have to come up and I'm like, actually, I have data and like I can represent these things really well organized. They're like, whoa, taken aback. Because I think to others, sometimes I look like I'm always hanging on by a thread. But I thought about it in a different way just right now when we were talking about a thread being it's helpful to hang on to that thread. Like I think Alexis, one of her super talents is being able to unknot necklaces. Oh, you too, Victoria. Okay. So it's like you get that little thread, that little chain, and like going to untie this. And it feels like in my life, sometimes if I just let all those things go, it's like I relate to Ed saying like can't let go. Like this is the only hanging on to this thread is the only way I can like start to pick away at this problem, like start to unravel these consequences that are getting a little bit out of control and have some success at like an untangled, usable situation. So, and I think trauma is often I think of that as like a it's weird because I think of it as a octopus tentacle. Sorry, I know better. An octopus arm. Um, but or like, as a thread to untangle. Did you know the difference between tentacles and arms, Victoria? Okay, I'm going to tell you. A tentacle only has suckers on the very end and then not going up, but an octopus has suckers going all the way up. So those are considered arms. And when I think about traumatic things, it's not going back to this core, like my mom didn't hold me long enough kind of thing. And that's why I have trauma. It's more these things that happened in my life that I have to clear out of my body. And I look at it as like a arm that's suctioned onto me, right? And it's holding me on. And if I can follow that back, it's not going to go back to the head of the kraken, but I'm on a tangent, but something that's really interesting that I've learned from Alexis is that an octopus basically its arm is a brain. It's like a functioning brain on its own. So if it's cut off from the head, it will still go and search and hunt and even capture food and go to feed it back to the beak. So that trauma is very alive. And if you can just follow it back and yeah, that's where I'm thinking is like it can be helpful to hold on to a thread. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that really weird?
No, I'm picking up everything you threw down, including the octopus arms. I'm picking
Thank
them
you.
up. I'm following all of that and in awe and of what I just learned.
That was amazing.
Thank you, love.
That was so cool. I don't have anything that cool, but I was thinking about this idea of hanging on by a thread. So, sewing, costuming. But I think the idea of hanging on by a thread is like, oh, I'm barely hanging on. And if you have the right thread in the right place, like that's going to hold. And you don't need much more than a thread. And if you ever have a button that you're like, how long has it been like that? That it's been holding on, so good, keeping things together until it just can't anymore. So again, like I always think of like it's not the thread is not good enough, or it's just is the thread in the right place? Is it going through the right layers? Is there a knot on one end to kind of keep things? And again, it will be looser maybe than you like. Doesn't mean it's falling apart. But it does depend on how long the thread gets, if you start pulling at it or yanking at it or cutting it or that kind of thing. So that's where I went to hanging on by a thread of, yeah, a thread maybe doesn't get enough credit for all the good it can do. But again, it has to be intentional for it to actually have the right impact and keep things together enough to until you're able to add more threads.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
also, like, but to your point too, like, enough credit, like, it's still going to take a whole lot to get it. I was just thinking, like, I cannot easily, like, just bite through a thread. Like, it is going to take a lot for you. Like, you need scissors. You are going to need scissors, like, to cut through the thread, unless, like, over a lot of time, right? And tension, like, multiple things have to happen for it to deteriorate. But that's amazing. That's just so beautiful. Like, and also like these all tie together like so nicely. I just love all these images as we're picturing what this means to us. It's cool.
Any other my life connections before we go on to the last one? All right. Now we think about all this conversation. What do we feel called to do, call for action going forward?
Oh, for me, I think it's just to hold on and keep going, like hold on to the thread and keep pulling myself forward. Because one of the things that I know that I tend to do is overthink. And so when I overthink, I just make whatever situation, maybe I'll go with like the best example, like work and everything. I'm not a big fan of where I work right now. And I always end up overthinking that it's going to be a terrible day. And I come out like, and when I actually do like, when I do push myself, which I have to, it ends up not being terrible. And so I know I do that to like a lot, like I do that to myself on several occasions where I just keep overthinking and just wanting to let go. And that always end up making me feel like a little bit not the best, not that was not the best plan. So I think just hanging on and keep moving forward and keep pulling on that thread, getting out of that labyrinth and everything. It's just that's that's what I'm gonna call to do. It's just keep going and hanging on because it's not as bad.
Kind of in connection to, the power of a thread and like this project that's on my mind at work. Like I wanted it to be a tapestry, right? I want it to be this really beautiful woven thing with all these parts. And it's going to be threadbare, right? But it's going to function. And I'm just going to have to, like I did what I could with what I had. And it's something that didn't exist. It wasn't for my efforts. Like just appreciate the threadbare parts, even if they're not a tapestry.
Yeah, that makes me think of, I guess my call to action would be similar in the sense of, hanging on by a thread and then how can you search out other threads? Because I was definitely thinking about the tapestry thing of how do you weave it all together? How do you make it stronger? How do you make it, because the thread by itself is quite strong, but again, how do you find reinforcements for that? And how do you take all these different things and find a way to incorporate them together to tell some, larger story of whatever you're working on? And so, yeah, I definitely like that idea of, yeah, hanging on by a thread. That doesn't mean you can't also be searching for another thread, and now you have two threads. And so you just one thread at a time, maybe is what I'm thinking, just one thread at a time. And that's already a good start. If you have one, at least you're okay because you have one. So, can only go up from here.
One, it just doubles your strength.
Exactly. So go find those threads.
Yeah, I think because I'm just thinking about that and I'm thinking what Anna just said, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna do, I guess I feel called to like how Anna explained that and then thinking like explained like the sewing connection, which I really appreciate. And then what you had said about what you were trying to do. And so I think I'm just gonna let that thread do its thing. And I'm like, and trust that it's there, like that one is there. And I'm like, okay, like Anna's got the bandwidth to go look for some additional threads. And I like the idea of knowing like, okay, when I'm ready, I can go find those additional threads. And I like that side of thing to think about. And also like thinking of it as a thread, right? Like just the next little thread. And then I also like what you're talking about too, like, and you didn't say this word, but like acceptance of whatever you've put into it at the end. And I guess even if it's threadbare or I still have my one thread, like I still have my one thread. So I'm going to trust the strength of that thread and give it credit. And then also like pace myself and be like, well, maybe I'll find another thread, but that one's got me. And I'm going to keep hanging on. I'm just going to keep hanging on. And the thread's doing its job.
I like this idea of the thread in y'all's lives, like being acceptance, being like Anna's kind of reminds me a little bit of hopefulness, and Victoria's like that acceptance, and Evelyn, like yours is a little bit faith sounding, like just like remember, this isn't going to last forever. I can get through this. So for me, I think I'm going to be really tangible about this. I'm pretty ADHD. Anybody who's met me can tell you, like, yeah, we second that. So I've had to do it multiple different times, but I'm just going to be really intentional. I've got a lot coming up. And I've had like rings before that I've worn, or little talismans that I'll like carry around to remind me of something, or a bracelet. And I think I'm going to legitimately like put a thread around my wrist to just like remind me of this intentionality of like, have some faith, accept, have some grace and hope. Like, you're going to get through this. And it is not going to be, you know, maybe this beautiful tapestry, but it's going to be something productive because you are alive and you are treating people with kindness to the best of your ability. And you're going to come out of this stressful period for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, you know, like, and if I don't come out, then I'll know that I lived the end of my life well, but I'll probably come out just fine. So I'm going to just keep that intentionality in my mind. We never can say what happened, right? You never know. But I think I'm going to be alive and fine. So I'll just have a little string around my wrist to remind me that.
That's great. All right, are we ready for blessings? I'll go first, then Katie, then Anna, then Evelyn, then Victoria. So I feel I must bless Mary. There's a lot of reasons I could bless Mary. I like also perhaps the writers in writing Mary, because I like that we have seen her for so long as kind of not a villain character, but definitely not with love and grace and a lot of positive associations. We've always just seen her as like a flashback of Steed and him being unhappy and she's unhappy. And so I love that we get to see her living this different life, setting these beautiful boundaries, and incorporating him, Steed, working together at the very end. I did love that she was going to stab him in the ear. That's reminds me of that painting. It's just great. So love Mary. I can't say enough good things about Mary.
I always try to sneak more than one in, but I'm going to go with the unnamed corpse that is in Steed's size. I don't know who he is. He'd never donated his body to the muckery or science or anything else. He was just there. I don't know who his family or his people are, but he is really taken for a ride and smashed up. And bless his little corpse. Let's just bless him.
Bless a little corpse. I am going to bless Steed's books. It's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. And it breaks my heart every time. Every time I watch it, I'm like, maybe this time it's not going to happen. But poor little books ending up in the ocean, because that's death for a book. There's no coming back from that. As much as you want to say it's beginning again, it's just really not if you're a book. And, you know, breakups are bad, but there's collateral damage, and it was not the book's fault. And I just feel bad that that happened to them, and I wish it didn't. So that's my blessing, is for Steve's books.
I'm going to bless Alma, Steed's daughter, Steed and Mary's daughter, because I bless her. She's had she was upset about him gone, and then him trying to come back into their life. And I really enjoy, and I love like her kind of acceptance and peace offering, like with her dad, of just like, I'm going to keep this half of the orange, like very mature young girl. And I'm only going to choose her because Lewis is just he's already over it. He was too young for it all to even realize what's the difference. But bless Alma, like with kind of saw a little bit of her just in this episode, but I really enjoy the interaction she's had with Steed, and I think it was really sweet.
That leaves me. I'm gonna bless Ed. And Ed in his grooves, in his Kraken groove and in his Blackbeard groove. And I also bled his charcoal beard that he's using to navigate those grooves. I really appreciate that. Because it's so funny now, having been through it again, I didn't remember that part. And then, of course, like how much we've talked about, like everything, I was like, oh, this is important. Because when he first puts the charcoal on, I'm like, what is he doing? And then I'm like, oh, the beard. But yes, bless Ed as he's navigating his grooves. Yes, bless him.
Beautiful.
All right, fantastic. Well, that's it for season 1. Next time we meet, we will begin discussing season 2. Let's see, our theme will be survival. Katie's going to give us our story, and our practice will be Lectio Divina.
Until next time, mermaids, when we can get together and talk it through as a crew. Death is, of course, an unavoidable part of the pirate lifestyle.
Blackbeard is himself again.
What if it's not a death? What if life just begins again?
Murder's a natural cause.
Ed. His name is Ed.